Hello, my name is Sophie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking you through my January reading wrap up. Ironically, everything is blue themed. As I'm filming this, I haven't quite finished my current read. I've got less than 100 pages left and I'm 99% certain I'm going to finish it before tomorrow. So with that in mind, I read 5 books in January. The first book I read, I wanted to kick off the year with a quick and easy win, is Galatea by Madeline Miller, who is the author of Song of Achilles and Circe. This was a 3-star read for me. It was fine. You know, it was as engaging as a book that is this little and this short can be. I think it was a way of highlighting a Greek story of a character that not many people are familiar with. Like, I'd never heard of Galatea before reading this book. I don't know how much of this was from Madeline Miller's imagination and how much of it was true to the Greek stories, but I thought it was fine. It was a nice quick win to start the year with, so I rated that 3 stars. The next book I finished was one that I started in December but I finished in January, and that is Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn, which is the second book in the Legendborn cycle. There's not much I can say about it without spoiling the first book. I think it's hard to talk about sequels in a review sense without ruining or spoiling anything from the earlier books of the series. I've rated Legendborn 3 stars because I thought there was too many characters, there was too much like terminology and too many people to have to remember, and my tiny brain couldn't comprehend it all. And I thought this built on that by kind of narrowing it down, bringing in a smaller cast of characters and making it more focused. But then right at the end, it just brought everyone back. All of the titles and the terminology was back, and it had all left my brain, and I found it really hard to comprehend. Because there's like a whole hierarchy, and it's like this person is higher than this person and this person's lower than this person, and we're not going to remind you, we're just going to use their names and you're going to remember who they all are. And I absolutely don't remember who they all are at the end, because it's all based on Arthurian legend, and at the end there is a list of 13 knights of Arthur's Round Table and all their like sigils and their strengths and things like that. And what I need is a glossary of terminology for how that became the table that Bree is living in the modern day. I just find it so confusing. I rated it 3 stars again, so it kind of matches the first book in its rating. I will be reading book 3, but at this point it's kind of one of those reluctant reads where I will read it because I want to know what happens and where the story goes and what happens to the characters, but I just found the whole world building was really difficult to comprehend. Maybe that's me, because I seem to be the only person who has rated this less than 4 or 5 stars, but I just found it a bit much. From there, it only went downhill, because you started with an average 3 stars, then a reluctant 3 stars, and then I went down to 2 stars with The Principle of Moments by Esme Jikimi Pearson. This is a 500-page sci-fi. They call it a space opera, and when I first started I didn't know what a space opera was. I was like, oh, it must be some sort of like the sci-fi version of epic fantasy, but it's not. Having googled it, the title space opera refers to like a sci-fi equivalent of a soap opera, so it's meant to be a bit trashy, kind of relationship heavy. But I mean, literally one of the articles I saw on Google was like, I consider space opera bad writing and it's somewhat intentional. And I was like, okay, I kind of get that. If you're comparing it to soap operas, yeah, trashy is definitely going to be the word that comes to. Kind of like those contemporary romances that you read that are complete trash, but you know they're trash and that's what you want from them. But this wasn't that at all. It was way too long, for one thing. The editing in it was actually quite bad, because there were some glaring mistakes that I noticed as someone who is not qualified in publishing at all. It just felt really repetitive, really dragged out, really slow paced. The relationship between the main 2 characters, it's interesting because it's building on a friendship kind of relationship rather than a romantic relationship, which I thought was an interesting choice, but also a choice that just didn't seem to fit. There were so many, it just would have been so natural for them to have come together in a romantic way as well as a platonic way. But it was an interesting choice that they didn't, but then it felt super forced. and their whole friendship, they were meant to have this really deep relationship where they were so connected to each other and they understood each other better than anyone else understood them. But I didn't feel that connection. I was told about it repetitively and emphatically, but I didn't feel that connection between those characters at all. The plot was clearly setting up for a larger overarching plot, so then the book itself felt really inconclusive. It's the first book in a series called The Order of Legends. I got this as part of my December Illumicrate box. It came out kind of publicly, for want of a better word, in January, so I received this over a month before it was officially published, which feels exciting. So people are only just now starting to read this book, so I feel like on the one hand I'm ahead of the curve, but also I'm not ahead of the curve with a book that I enjoyed, so it's not as fun in any way, shape or form. Yeah, the whole thing was just a setup for a larger series, and it was trying to be this like epic sci-fi space time travel book, but it just felt like, because it set up so many plot lines, there was 3 or 4 lines that were completely unresolved, and there was one plot line that did get resolved in quite an anticlimactic way. So it wasn't a satisfying read. After 500 pages, you'd like to feel kind of some sort of satisfaction and conclusion, but this just didn't have that at all. I rated it 2 stars. I'm really disappointed in it, and I'm actually considering cancelling my Illumicrate subscription, because out of the 4 books I've received from Illumicrate, I've read 2 of them, and I've only rated, I rated A Study in Drowning 3 stars and this one 2 stars. So maybe the books that Illumicrate picked just aren't for me. I recently got my January box, and if I don't like that book, maybe Illumicrate isn't for me. But I was really disappointed in this one. And then it only got worse, because we had matching sprayed edges with the blue and the stars, but I read With This Kiss by Cara Hope Fletcher on Kindle Unlimited, because I want to make sure I'm using my Kindle Unlimited subscription and like making sure the money I'm paying for it is worth it. So I thought I'd start reading some of my backlog TBR on Kindle Unlimited. Is that kind of defying the point because I'm not using it to read books that I don't own? Probably, but this is the best I've got. And this was even worse because I rated it 1 star. This book, I should probably tell you what some of these books are about. Basically, this is a book about a character called Lorelei, who whenever she kisses someone on the lips, she sees how they die. And that has obviously given her a lot of trauma and has put her off romantic relationships for what she assumes is the rest of her life. But then she meets a man. It was so insta-lovey. You kind of had these dual plot points where she was trying to understand more about this power that she has, and how it connected her to her heritage and her grandma. There was this whole thing with her grandma in the past, and then alongside that there was this man that she meets at the cinema she works at, and how she was instantly in love with him and he was instantly in love with her, and how maybe he'd be worth the risk, blah 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 blah. For one, there was a scene that should have included, I think, 2 major trigger warnings for suicide and sexual harassment, and nowhere in this physical edition, granted this is not even granted, I'm not giving it that benefit, I pre-ordered this when it came out in 2022. It's the exclusive Waterstones edition, hence the sprayed edges. It's signed, so this is almost certainly a first edition, and it has no warning or no trigger warnings page whatsoever. The edition I read on Kindle Unlimited, I assume, is a digital version of the paperback that was released semi-recently. So a newer edition also doesn't have any trigger warnings page at all. And I understand that if you're someone who has those triggers, maybe they expect you to do that extra work to look for trigger warnings. But other than Goodreads and Storygraph, I personally wouldn't know where to look for those trigger warnings, and I think it shouldn't be on the reader to go looking to see whether a book is going to be something that triggers them. I think it should be in the publication. It should be after the, dedication, before chapter 1, but alongside being upset that there's no trigger warnings in this book, the characters were so unrealistic. When I say the writing style was middle grade, I don't mean it in a way that middle grade writing is bad. It's just that middle grade writing doesn't fit an adult book, with a character that swears every second word, which again also feels super forced and unrealistic. and references to sex, which, you know, fine in an adult book. It's not a smutty book. It just didn't fit. And all of the characters felt so extreme and melodramatic and just completely unrealistic in everything they did. I found them really irritating, didn't enjoy it at all, rated it 1 star. I'm really annoyed that I feel compelled to keep this beautiful special edition because it is special and I pre-ordered it, but I hate the book. So on the other hand, I'm like, I don't need this in my life. And then the book that I'm hoping to finish before the end of the month is my book club pick for January, and it's Murder Most Unladylike by Robin Stevens. This is a middle grade murder mystery book, and let me explain why I'm reading that. My book club is called the Rocket Book Club. It's kind of just a book club for me. Sometimes my husband joins in, but the whole premise is that when my husband and I got married, we asked our guests to gift us copies of their favourite books, so we'd have a little library of our favourite people's favourite books, and in an endeavour to read them all, in the January of 2023, I started what I'm calling the Rocket Book Club, where we take it in turns to pick a book each month. I read it and he doesn't, and I'm slowly making my way through reading all the books we received as wedding gifts. So this was the gift from one of my bridesmaids who was 11 at the time, hence the middle grade reading book. And this is proof that I can enjoy a middle grade reading style when it's written for the right target audience. I have less than 100 pages left of this book, and so far I think I would give it a 4-star rating. It's really sweet, the characters are really fun, and it's set at a girls' boarding school, and the main character, Hazel, discovers one of her teacher's dead body in their gym, and when she goes to fetch help, by the time she gets back, the body is gone. So not only is there a murder mystery to solve, they have to prove there was a murder in the first place, and it's really fun. I've even tabbed a couple of bits. There was some bits that made me laugh out loud. There's some really sweet lines. There's a really interesting character dynamic between the protagonist Hazel and the other member of the detective society, Daisy, and I think there's going to be an interesting lesson about friendship there. There's also an interesting kind of story arc about race, as Hazel is a Chinese character who is going to school at this girls' boarding school, and obviously in the 30s racism was very different to how it is now, and it's interesting to see how she notices people treating her differently and things she's done to fit in more, and you know, that typical kid thing of just wanting to fit in and be liked by people. And I think that's a really interesting narrative as well. There is, I mean, on the back here there are like 9 other books in this series, and the Works have just started doing a box set of more books within this series, and I'm genuinely partially tempted to go buy more of them because I'm enjoying this so much. Realistically, I don't think I will be going to buy more of this middle grade murder mystery series, but I am very much enjoying reading this one, and I envision being able to finish it before the end of January. So that is 5 whole books that I read in January. One of them was a 500-page crappy space opera. In terms of my January TBR, there were 10 books on my January TBR, and I've read 3 of them. Didn't do great on that front. I used that to kind of alter my February TBR ever so slightly, so I'm hoping to be slightly more successful next month, especially as it's a shorter month, only by 2 days, but it feels significant. That's everything I read in January. If I squeeze in any more books before the end of the month, I'll be sure to let you know. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you at the weekend for another weekly reading vlog. Bye!